Hi there, and welcome back to an English lesson on TV. We are your hosts. I'm Mr. Darrell.
And I'm Miss Samantha. And today we will be talking about Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe.
And this is specifically for grades 7, 8, and 9.
Let's begin.
Yeah.
Here is our agenda, or our plan for today. First, we'll talk about vocabulary words you'll need to know for our discussion and for the book.
Then we will look at the author. Usually good to know a little bit about the author before we start.
Definitely. Then we'll get into the summary. What is Robinson Crusoe all about?
After that, we will be looking at some of the characters, some of the main ones, some of the minor ones.
And then we will look at when and where this story takes place, otherwise known as the setting.
Yes, and after that, we will have a look at some of the main themes. This usually answers the questions why, how, what.
And finally, to conclude, we will review what we've learned and go over a little bit of homework.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. First up, our vocabulary. The first word you'll need to know for today is to survive. To survive means to live even after facing difficult situations.
Our second word is to sail. And that is when you travel, like in the old days, on the seas by the wind, by the power of the wind.
And hopefully, Darrell, when you are sailing, you do not encounter a shipwreck, because a shipwreck is the destruction of a ship when it crashes, usually from a storm or maybe a rock.
Exactly. And you don't want to be stranded. That's our next word, stranded. You don't want to be stranded somewhere. It means being stuck somewhere you can't get out of.
Yes. And if you are stranded, hopefully you are then rescued. Our next word, to rescue, which means to save someone from a difficult or dangerous situation.
And now, you often have to be rescued from a deserted island. It's an island. An island is a place surrounded by water. A deserted island is an island where there's no one else except you. And not to be confused with a desert island, Samantha.
No, I would love to be on a desert island with cakes and cookies, but on a deserted island, I would be our next word. I would be all alone, which means when you are by yourself and there is nobody there. And I would also feel lonely, another word we have, which is the sad, negative feeling you get when you are by yourself.
If stuck on a deserted island, you'd need a bit of this next word, resourceful. It's the ability to have quick and easy answers using your intelligence and your skills, making use of things around you to get yourself out of a situation.
Yeah, great word. Now, keep all of these vocabulary words in mind as we continue our lesson. Now we should talk about the author. Darrell, why do we talk about the author?
Well, I think it's very important to talk about the author because the book that we would look at is often based on events in the author's life, his experiences, his opinions, his world. And that's why it's important to look at it.
Oh, well said. So let's dive into our specific author of the day, Daniel Defoe.
Well, Daniel Defoe is a British author in the late 17th and early 18th century. He comes from London, and it is the time of the British Empire. I should note that he gets started quite late, so he's known for being a writer that began his writing career quite late. But this is the reason. It was the time of the Empire, as we mentioned, and he was busy traveling all over the world and getting into all sorts of trouble.
Yes, and that's not the only way he was busy. Daniel Defoe wrote over 300 texts, Of course, Robinson Crusoe is his most famous. It's actually the second most translated book in the world after the Bible.
Wow, that would make it one of the most popular books ever written.
Definitely, it really is. So let's get into it and talk about what actually happens in Robinson Crusoe with our summary.
Okay, well, this adventure novel begins with Robinson Crusoe, a young man who decides to leave his home to sail the seas. He's about 18 years of age, I think. He's obviously excited, but once at sea, he encounters pirates and a terrible storm. Talk about double trouble.
Oof, really?
And both those things leave him shipwrecked on a deserted island.
Yes, there were no other survivors from his ship. So Robinson Crusoe is all alone on this island, completely stranded. But he is resourceful and he finds ways to survive. He builds a house, hunts animals, grows his own food, and learns so many new skills to make the best life for himself. He also reads the Bible and finds comfort as he grows closer to God and feels a lot less lonely on his island.
Now, after many, many years all alone on the island, Robinson Crusoe discovers a new group of people have arrived on the island. It's a group of cannibals who are just about to eat a man until Robinson rescues that man and fights away the cannibals. He and this man, whom he names Friday, after the day of the week that they meet, come from very different backgrounds and don't speak the same language, but they become very good friends.
That they do. They learn from each other and have a comfortable life on the island together until one day a ship of Englishmen arrive on their island. But to find out what happens next, you'll just have to read the book for yourself. And it's a good one.
Looking forward to it.
Yes. Now let's take a look at the characters of the story that we mentioned.
Well, yes, it is important to look at characters because you need to know sometimes who are the main characters, who are the minor characters, and this can help your understanding of the story.
Definitely. Now we'll take a look at our hero of the story, Robinson Crusoe. He goes through some important changes on his time on the island. One of them is that he becomes more religious. He finds comfort in the Bible and his relationship with God, so he feels a lot less lonely as he's alone on the island.
Another thing about Robinson Crusoe is his resourcefulness, if you think back to our word at the beginning. He is a resourceful man. He finds ways to get food. He builds a ship for himself. He organizes the island. He creates a little mini civilization around him, although he's by himself. So he's what we would call highly resourceful. And this is something to think about from the book as well.
Yes, such good points. Of course, we can't forget about our other main character, Friday. Now, when Robinson Crusoe and Friday meet, Friday doesn't speak any English, and he was actually a cannibal from another island, if you can believe it. But even though they come from very different backgrounds and they don't speak the same language, they become really good friends, they learn from each other, and have a very special relationship with each other.
That brings up an interesting point. Friday is an English learner, I guess, like many of our viewers.
Yes,
so
that's true.
Something to relate there.
Yeah, good observation. So now that we talked about the characters, let's move on to setting.
What is setting, Samantha?
I'm glad you asked, Daryl. Setting is the time and place, or when and where, of the story. Now, let's dive into the setting of Robinson Crusoe.
Yes, I'll start with the when of the story. So it is, of course, set in the 17th century and the early 18th century. which is, of course, the time that Defoe, the author, lives in. Takes about the span of about 28 years, and it reflects Defoe's own experiences, because Robinson Crusoe was a busy man at the beginning of the story. He was traveling all over the world. He was engaged in business, in fact, when he was shipwrecked. And the main theme that I think Defoe wants to bring out from this is what do you do when everything is taken away from you? And I think that's something we can take a lot out of.
Definitely. And that brings us to the where. As Daryl mentioned, it was the British Empire and they were traveling everywhere. So we start this story in England, but then Robinson Crusoe sails across the Atlantic Ocean towards South America until he is shipwrecked on the deserted island, probably somewhere near Venezuela or Trinidad and Tobago. And now let's move on to the main themes.
Okay, Samantha, what are main themes? What are they all about?
Oh, good question. So the main theme of a story is what the author is trying to communicate through the characters and the events. In other words, the main theme is the main idea of the story. Daryl, would you mind telling us a little bit about the main theme of Robinson Crusoe?
Not at all. I think one of the main themes of the book is the isolation aspect, which I think has relevance to our modern
Our current
day.
situation,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think this is the ultimate isolation story. It's the ultimate shipwreck story, for sure. What happens when you lose everything? Robinson loses his family, his friends, his entire society, and his ambitions as well. He was a very ambitious person. And he doesn't lose hope, though. It's his resourcefulness and his survival instincts that keep him going, as well as his religion.
Yes. So you're so right. He's very resourceful and he finds things to keep him busy and make him feel less lonely. One of those things, you know, he has to figure out how to cope emotionally with this isolation, just like all of us are doing now. Robinson Crusoe copes by creating routines, creating his own little society, and of course, turning to religion. So it's interesting. What are we going to do during our isolation?
Indeed.
But that is just about all the time we have for today. So let's look at what we learned. We started with the author information, Daniel Defoe. We moved on to the summary. What is Robinson Crusoe all about? Surviving on a deserted island. Then we took a look at our main characters, Robinson Crusoe, of course, and Friday. Then we looked at when and where, the setting, on a deserted island in the 18th century. And finally, we talked about our main theme of isolation and how to deal with that.
We shouldn't forget our word list at the beginning of the presentation. We have to survive, to sail, shipwreck, stranded, to rescue, deserted island, alone or lonely, and resourceful.
Yes. So that brings us to our favorite part, of course, homework time.
I guess it wouldn't be a lesson without some homework.
It really wouldn't be.
Well, the question we have chosen for you to think about and maybe to write something up and send it on to us is, what would you bring on a deserted island if you were stuck on a deserted island?
Great question. We'll have to think about that too. So please write your answers down and send them to englishbookeducation.co.uk/homework, and we'll give those a read. That's all the time we have for today. It was wonderful chatting with you guys about Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, and we'll see you all next week.
Have a great week.
Bye, everyone.